Hi, Dr. Crystal Brazier here. Let's talk about some basics of Adlerian therapy. First, a disclaimer, this is just hitting the high points. Adlerian is a very rich theory and therapeutic approach. It has a whole lot to it. That is both, in my opinion, its biggest strength and its biggest challenge. Because remember, theory, one of the purposes of theory is to narrow down, to delimit what we're focusing on in session with clients so that we as finite creatures can attend well to whatever pieces we've decided to focus on. So with Adlerian, there's a lot. So it doesn't do, in my opinion, quite as well in some cases as at narrowing down what we're focusing on. But there is so much rich understanding here about the person as a whole. So let's take a look. I'm going to just start with Romans 1:11 through 12. For I long to see you, that I may impart to you some spiritual gift to strengthen you. That is, that we may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith, both yours and mine. So this idea of strengthening being important is very Adlerian. So is this idea of encouragement. So we'll talk about encouragement and discouragement and Adler's view of mental health based on that principle of encouragement, that mental health sort of equals encouragement, mental unhealth equals discouragement. And I just love this idea here of mutual encouragement. So some basics of Adlerian therapy. It is psychodynamic. Remember, Adler was a contemporary of Freud's, and when he broke off from what the Freudian thought, he took with him some ideas about the conscious and the preconscious and the unconscious and all of that. So there is a psychodynamic and certainly, an attachment-focused piece here in Adler, like Freud and like psychodynamic people are focused. Adler is focused on childhood stuff as it relates to the person today. But Adlerian is also much more humanistic and much more positive. It focuses a lot on strengths and strengthening strengths. And also there are components in Adlerian where it seems to be that he believes that the person has inside of them what they need to get better. They just need an environment in which that is able to come to fruition. So it's insight-based, which is another sort of humanistic type element in a way. This idea that once I know more, I have more choice available to me to act to get my good needs met in healthy ways. So this focus on knowing more awareness, more insight. Like I said, it's really complex. It has a lot of different focus areas. And in some ways that can feel somewhat fragmented until you remember that the theory is sort of woven together and bound together with this idea of encouragement. So there's a cognitive aspect to it. And in fact, some people claim that Adler was the great-grandfather of cognitive behavioral therapy. So there's this piece of it about challenging, discouraging thoughts and beliefs. So notice the discouraging piece here to it, right? It's not just challenging thoughts and beliefs. We're going to identify which thoughts and beliefs are discouraging and specifically target those. And then there's a behavioral aspect to it as well. So we're also going to challenge self-defeating behaviors, so behaviors that cause feelings of discouragement. We're going to develop problem-solving skills, which can help the person feel more competent, more confident, more encouraged. But there's also a systemic piece. So Adler is not just focused on the individual, he's also focused on the systems in which the person has operated in the past, like the family of origin system, and also present systems. So not just family, but also community, societal systems. There's a systemic piece to this, both how it impacts the client and how the client impacts their systems. So there's this idea in Adlerian theory and therapy about striving. This idea that all individuals are striving for success. They're working towards superiority, which for Adler does not mean I am better, I am over you, But this idea of competency, I think superiority for Adler means more like competency, like I can do this, I can face hard things, I can overcome, tying back to Brene Brown's idea of hope, that hope is not a gauzy feeling, rather hope is this belief in oneself to persevere and plan B if necessary. And so there's this also very important piece of social interest, which is the innate desire to cooperate. So just as Adler believed that we all carry inside of us this striving toward success and competency, what he would call superiority, along with that goes this innate movement and desire for cooperation, to make a good difference in the world. By working with other people. And Adler would see this social interest piece as sort of outward evidence to an inward state. In other words, if I look at a client and they are operating well in their systems, they are cooperating, they are making a difference, a positive difference within their community, their family, their social system, then Adler would say that that's an indication of an interior superiority, an interior belief in themselves, their ability to do hard things, their willingness to flex, all of that. And so this idea that Adler holds is that mental health problems are not caused by genetics. They're also not caused by the environment, although the environment is key, right? There's a systemic aspect, but rather mental unhealth, which he would equate with inferiority, is caused by unhealthy reactions to these factors. In other words, in my childhood experiences in those systems, did I take on a feeling of inferiority by reacting to the environment, and how and the environment playing a part in that is important, and he doesn't ignore the fact that that happened. But he's saying now, where you're at right now, you can change your reaction. And you can change your patterns of coping that you've carried from childhood. And that can actually help you attain greater mental health, which would be greater superiority and out of that would flow a greater desire for social interest. So let me break it down. This is a graph I made up. You won't see it in any textbook probably or anything, but I wanted to, in a graphic way, depict sort of Adler's ideas about striving, about inferiority and superiority. So when a person perceives a weakness of theirs, it could be a physical weakness, a social weakness, whatever, a place that they are inferior, because they are weaker. We all have strengths and weaknesses. And so when a person perceives one of their weaknesses, one of their reactions, their responses can be to strive to overcome that weakness in some way. And that striving should lead to greater encouragement. They should be less discouraged and more encouraged as they strive toward superiority, which again isn't better than anybody else. It's a feeling of competency, a trust in oneself. I can do hard things, right? And they might strive for that in one or two ways. The first way is they may strive for superiority in the weakness area that they identified. So they might strive for mastery over that perceived weakness. For example, if my family values athletics, especially a specific sport, like say my family values football, but I feel weak in the area of football, one way that I could strive for superiority would be to go out and practice. I might run every day and lift weights. I might practice, throwing the ball, catching the ball, that kind of thing. I might work at learning different plays and running them so often that my body just sort of remembers them. And in that way, I would increase my encouragement as I increase my superiority over that perceived weakness. And so when I have success in that, that will also lead to more social interest. In other words, when my family is playing football outside, I'll go outside with them and play football. When my family is, watching football games or talking about football, I will engage in those conversations. I will engage with that. And success could also lead to a superiority complex, which could mean that I, maybe feel superior over others, which may not be healthy, but it's not so much that it's a superiority in and of itself isn't considered negative. Superiority is considered positive, in that it's not, again, over others. It is with. It is with. That would be what social interest would emerge like, is a withness. And maybe even with social interest, this idea that I recognize others who feel inferior about football and I coach them. And even though they're my peers, I work with them and encourage them and bring them up too. But if I perceive that my family really values football, but I'm always going to be tiny, I'm never going to be really superior at football because I just don't have the body build for it. Or maybe I have bad allergies and I hate being outdoors, whatever. I could strive in a different way. I could strive by compensating. And compensating is, well, y'all may love football, but I love, I don't know, community service. And so y'all can go do football. I'm going to go serve at this food pantry. Okay. And so I find my identity and my somewhat value and worth, but it's more like I find my place in the world by mastering something else other than my perceived weakness, mastery over something else. It could be academics. It could be a different sport where my size isn't going to be an issue. Remember, it's not about what my genetics handed me, it's about my reaction to my genetics. And I could take a look and say, okay, my genetics handed me a body that's never going to be great big, or a body that is going to always attack itself when I'm outdoors in the green and all the pollen and everything. So, but that doesn't mean that I can't find mastery, superiority in a different way that's equally as valuable. If I achieve success in mastering something else, then I again achieve social interest. So if, for example, I mean, obviously the volunteering one is pretty obvious. If I achieve mastery over activism and that kind of thing, then I'll become very involved in that world and be making a difference in the world that way. If I, for example, instead went the academics route, then I would master that, and then that would lead to social interest where I'm involved in academic clubs, and maybe I'm leading in academic clubs, and I am tutoring other students, and I am, it's always with Adler. When you reach superiority, it's never just superiority for just myself. It's always superiority that leads to a confidence that moves toward others and helps out, makes a good difference in the world. Or if I just achieve success again, I could hit a superiority complex where I feel like I am better than everyone else and that kind of thing, and that would diminish social interest. Now, that is what happens. Those are the potential pathways if I strive. But what happens if I perceive a weakness in myself, and rather than striving and becoming encouraged, I instead fail? I strive and fail, or because of past failure, I don't even try. Then I will develop what he calls an inferiority complex. This is discouragement. This is, I no longer believe in my ability to do hard things. I no longer believe in my ability to face barriers and flexibly overcome them. Instead, I buy into this sort of core belief that I can't, a learned helplessness, a victimization. And this can very much be based on early childhood experiences, not only of failure, but in the cases of trauma, early childhood experiences where sort of I can't trust the world to be a safe place that helps get my needs met. I can't trust others to help. I'm all alone and I'm not enough. Those are the messages that trauma sends, especially in childhood. And so inferiority can be connected to early childhood experiences, which from an Adlerian lens would be very discouraging and would sort of create a belief system and almost an embodied experience of discouragement. So if I'm in that place, I perceive a weakness, but I am in this place of discouragement, I am struggling with an inferiority complex, then what will emerge from that is a sense of inadequacy, I'm not enough. Hopelessness, I can never do it. I can't get there. I'm not able. A belief that there is insufficient strength to solve the problem. So whatever it takes to get from A to B, I ain't got it. And so then because there's something sort of deficient in myself, this sort of generalizes to the world. And so in any situation that arises, my tendency will be to believe I'm not enough. It's hopeless. I don't have what it takes to solve this problem. So here's how Adler would answer those three big questions. Remember, all theories of counseling should answer sort of three big questions. What are people born with? How do people get sort of messed up, unhealthy? And how does counseling help people heal, get healthier? So Adler would say, people are born into a family system that shapes how they will live their lives. That does not mean that they are destined to always be that way, but that means that if their early childhood experiences, their experiences in their families of origin led to discouragement and an inferiority complex, that people will need to work harder to overcome that than people who were born into family systems that actually sort of nurtured and fostered encouragement and mastery and a belief that I can do hard things. Even we can do hard things in this family. People become discouraged. That's the unhealth. Not when they experience inferiority. Remember, that's where that graph started, is an experience of inferiority. The experience in and of itself, Adler did not believe was the problem. But the problem comes when they give up striving to reach superiority, and they become discouraged. And Adlerian therapy helps clients overcome discouragement by gaining insight about what is or is not working in their style of life, by challenging discouraging thoughts and beliefs, by identifying self-defeating behaviors and changing them, and by developing and strengthening problem-solving skills. You can see here this sort of focus on, I believe I can do hard things. It is a cognitive thing, but it is also an embodied experience of hope, that tenacity, that perseverance. And then it will demonstrate itself in behaviors, where the person doesn't give up after the first fail, but keeps on striving. So in that diagram, where if there was failure, they might return to, okay, still I'm experiencing failure. Do they then go back to encouragement, or do they go down to discouragement? Because the experience of failure is not the problem, according to Adler. It's whether they continue to strive or give up striving. You'll know that Adlerian therapy is working when clients resume striving for superiority. And along with that, they experience and express social interest. Remember, always, movement toward health is not just for the client, it is also to benefit the greater system in which the client lives and works. Again, social interest is that ability to express cooperation. So it's not just about you and I are working toward a common goal, but it's how I'm able to work with others who are different from me, others who have different areas of superiority and inferiority / strength or weakness. Can I flexibly adapt? Can I continue to work with them and work things out with them, even when we hit roadblocks and barriers? Social interest has this innate cooperative aptitude. We all have this. Adler believes, you want to talk about what were you born with? Adler believes we were all born with an innate desire to cooperate with others, and even an ability, but people have varying levels of ability to experience and express social interest, and that may have been shaped by their experiences in childhood within their families of origin and other systems. And then parent-child relationship is important in the formation of social interest. So that attachment, does that attachment style give birth to a person who believes I can do hard things? Or does that secure attachment? Or does that attachment style give birth to beliefs like in insecure attachment? Maybe it's insecure anxious. So it's, I can't do hard things, and I need other people in order to get along in the world. And not just that I want them, but that I need them because there's nothing I can do myself. I'm discouraged, and so I need others. or an attachment of sort of rather than anxious, insecure, it's that avoidant insecure. And so it's like, I can't trust others, so I don't need anybody. It's just me. I'm an island. I can do it on myself. I'm not going to trust anybody else. I'm not going to let anybody else help me, and I'm not going to help anybody else. So you can see how these different attachment styles that are born out of our early attachment experiences, especially with our primary caregivers, can impact this experience of encouragement or discouragement that will show itself in either sort of isolation or social interest and cooperation, or in the insecure, anxious, this clingy need where I never develop a sense of competency within myself because I always am seeking to find it through others doing it for me. Social interest can be a measure of assessment. So if you see a person with low social interest in Adlerian view, it may be that that's an indicator of poor mental health. Whereas if you see someone with high social interest, that may be an indicator of healthy psychological experience. Not always would this be the case. Obviously, sometimes people may be sublimating. Remember that coping strategy from the psychoanalytic/psychodynamic approach. Sublimating is this idea that I feel discouraged by this, so I funnel my energy into something else. If a person has discouragement, they may be funneling all their energy into trying to feel competent by outward expressions of things, but there's still a competency deficiency. There's still discouragement inside, but it can be a good indicator in that people who are struggling with mental health are often find it difficult to think beyond their own experience about what it must be like for others. Empathy becomes more difficult when I'm struggling with my mental health. So I'm sort of curled in upon myself in a world of hurt. So goals for Adlerian therapy: change self-defeating behaviors and cognitions, and these can be done interchangeably. So Adler doesn't always say, as CBT says, in order to change my beliefs, I must change my beliefs in order to change my behaviors. Rather, we could play with these, and so sometimes it could be that we try to change that self-defeating belief, and sometimes it could be that we try to do a behavioral intervention to change the self-defeating behavior, believing that the belief might follow. And so we'll learn more about that when we learn about behaviorism. That's sort of a behavioral enactment strategy. Increase social interest. So this is sort of also an outside inward approach. If this person is curled in upon themselves in their own pain, isolated, alone, and very navel-gazing, self-focused, if you put them in an environment in which they have opportunities to begin to learn about others and care about others, might that actually shift those self-defeating beliefs and behaviors? Might they start to perk up and take an interest in others and care about the well-being of others and take action to make others' lives better, make a positive difference in their systems? Develop problem-solving skills. So it's not the idea that healthy people don't hit barriers. It's the idea that I feel confident in my ability to overcome the barriers that I will hit in my life. I feel encouraged. Create a more adaptive style of life. So this requires the lifestyle assessment to be conducted thoroughly and accurately in the beginning so that we can identify what's working in their style of life and what's not working in their style of life. And we can pinpoint what's not working and help them create more adaptive lifestyle. I want to thank you for your attention to this presentation on Adlerian therapy basics. Again, I want to sort of bookend this thing by saying this is just a very brief, hugely, grossly oversimplified, big picture view at Adlerian therapy basics. But I hope it's been helpful.